goes to item 15, and I'd like to explain this again. In executive session, we did not finish all the items, and we should. But on a normal basis, we finish this and go back so that the public is here and not wait. But now, if this board would want to go back so that you finish all of them and then come back out. But we never had done that. But I just want to be sure y'all feel good about what my call. Okay? We good? Okay. So, on items A, B, or C, which we did cover, do I have any motions?
Yeah, on item A, 3A, I move that we approve the selected employment items shown in Exhibit A for action.
Is there a second? Ms. Huddle seconds. Now, any discussions? Seeing none, those in favor of selected employment items in Exhibit A, raise your hand, and that is 7 to none. B was information only. We did go over C. I have something I'd like to I wrote a statement that's very important to me for the integrity of this wonderful board that works so very hard. I've served on school board for almost 15 years. During that time, I have worked for the benefit of all our students and staff, as well as our taxpayers. Years ago, I fought for rebuilding the academic portion of Irmo High. That should have been a priority, but the former boards focused on other building projects and ignored the need for equity across the district. While reviewing and correcting procurement issues should have been a priority, former boards racked up over $1 million on attorney fees and seemed to have little interest in digging into procurement. The public spoke in 2020, and a new board was elected. A board focused from the very beginning on ensuring the building and the equity issues in Irmo were addressed and that wasteful spending was eliminated. So this new board dug in. Despite resistance and constant media attacks, this board has brought forth the results of a comprehensive procurement audit. We are not done, and we will not be deterred. We will continue to ferret our practices that are wasteful and not in the best interest of our taxpayers and our staff, and most of all, our students. With that was the statement I wanted to make because of this issue being an item on executive session and now for any action if there's any board member that would like to make a motion. Yes.
I move that since JAG has approved release of the Phase 1 Procurement Examination Executive Summary Report, the report be made available to the public and posted on the district's website by noon tomorrow.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me.
I have a question about that. While I definitely agree that it should be made public, it was my understanding that it's not being made public because the draft preliminary opinion or report isn't complete, and we've been specifically asked to keep it confidential. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I just am questioning why that was, stated by the auditor. I mean, we got this, late last night, and I saw it for the first time today, so I'm just curious.
To clarify, not the detail report, but the summary report, and the auditor did authorize release of that report, and I actually have a second motion on reporting it. So if we're going to report it to agencies, we ought to make it available to the public. They paid for it.
The draft or the
summary? Just the summary.
Yeah, there was a summary, Ms. Hines, because you're correct about...
I saw the summary. It's all together, so...
Well, I want to make this clear. The audit actually explained that they could, for the public, give a summary. And that summary was sent by email to all of us. Yeah. And so that is, and then we had very details in executive session. None of that would be in that. Okay. Correct? Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Mr. Hogan.
with, I guess with us releasing this preliminary report, or the preliminary summary, excuse me, when this audit's complete and when they have a final product to give us, do we just re-release that? And I guess
I think that's when we turn that over to the
well, I believe Ms. Huddle mentioned she has another motion with reporting.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that we're,
That's a good point. I mean, I could amend my motion to say that in the final report will be made available as well once it's available. Or somebody else could make that amendment. But I agree with you. This is only saying release what they've approved to be released as far as the summary report. But you're right. I think it goes without saying that when the final report comes out, we would release that as well. But if it would make people more comfortable, I can amend my own motion to do that. Why don't I just do that? Can I do
I'd like that, a friendly amendment.
Okay, I'm gonna amend my motion to say, I move that since JAG has approved release of the Phase 1 Procurement Examination Executive Summary Report, the report be made available to the public and posted on the district's website by noon tomorrow, and that upon receipt of the final report in the future, that it will also be released to the public.
And then we have a second to that amendment. Thank you. Now, any other questions? Yes,
So my
Ms.
question to that is, will it be identified on the district website that it is a draft preliminary report and is subject to change in the final report? Or something to that effect?
I'd like to speak to that.
My motion is that it would be released exactly like it was provided to us.
As a draft preliminary report?
Yes, yes, okay. Any other question? Well, let's have a vote on that. And that is 7-0.
Motion.
Thank you. All right, that one passed. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. My motion is pursuant to Agenda Item 3C, Preliminary Procurement Audit Report, including personnel matters. In response to the preliminary and future findings of the procurement audit, the board appoints the Procurement Committee as the proper venue for discussion and receipt of advice, including but not necessarily limited to, inter alia, legal advice. The Procurement Committee shall present its recommendations to the full board for prescriptive action.
And do you mind reading it one more time?
Okay.
I'm
In
sorry.
response to the preliminary and future findings of the procurement audit, the board appoints the Procurement Committee as the proper venue for discussion and receipt of advice, including but not necessarily limited to legal advice, inter alia. The Procurement Committee shall present its recommendations to the full board for prescriptive action.
Is there a second? Ms. Huddle seconds. Since you made that.
Yes,
sure.
you know, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted you to explain.
Yeah.
I know that if we find things, which is the reason we want this done, we find things in procurement that need changing with our policy. That's where you are with.
Yeah, that, you know, what my point of view for all of this is that, you know, we can look backwards through the rearview mirror, but we need to look forward to where we're going. I mean, you can't drive the car through the rearview mirror. We know there are things that weren't done right. We know that we need to make adjustments for that. And the only place that we can do that as a board is in the Procurement Committee, because that was what we set it up for. We set it up to be able to discuss amongst ourselves in public and field ideas that were good and bad, but also we need to know that we have cured some of these things that were in the past. And if we don't do that and we just sit here and talk about it, then we haven't really done what we set out to do, and that's to make new procedures or policies, more like policy, but procedures can follow from the administration to repair some of the damage that's been done.
And I would like to shout out really to Ms. Gardner. I think that she's worked hard on, we have corrected some of this that was brought to light. Some of these things we have found out in the audit have been addressed and fixed by this board, so that it does go forward, like Mr. Loveless is saying. I just don't want, I have no problem with that motion. And I want the procurement committee to, that's important where it is in policy. But I was just thinking, I don't want to, the board's open to discussion of it too, not just, because every board member can't always go to a committee meeting. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
But what the point was is that we would come up with some consensus.
And bring it to the board.
And then bring it back to the full board to discuss in executive session if need be, or out here in the public. But that's something other than just, we're looking at situations where we've been at, right now we're spending $60 million roughly on Irmo High School and on Chapin, the stadium. We've still got the same old problems that we had before we looked at any of this, okay? So we have to be good stewards of the citizens' money or the taxpayers' money. We have to go out and make sure that the procedures we have in place are the absolute best that we can provide.
Well, let's take, yes, Ms. Moore, thank you.
My only issue with this is the fact that, as you just said, a lot of people can't make it to a procurement meeting, nor can our public a lot of times. They're working, they can't stream it, they see it afterwards. So if we're talking that this is going to be talked about in there and then we're going to bring it to executive session, it only right that any information that we have be shared with our community.
And that was something I want to make clear, that I agree with, it needs to be shared. And I think Mr. Lovelace agrees to that. You're just finding the venue for it to be, guys, the idea of a committee, because some districts across the state do it and do it very productively. And I think we've been doing it productively. And I know there have been some board members that have the feeling I can't be there. But it isn't an idea to do anything without the full board knowing it. You bring that, it's a place to discuss, and then you bring it to the full board. That one little committee doesn't make the decision, so.
Ms. Moore, I mean.
Wait a minute, Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, if you wanted to amend the motion to put in there that we have, which that's fine with me, that we have it on camera tape, we got everybody, so that everybody can look at it after the fact. I understand that, that some of us are older and some of us are younger. We got families, and I really do understand that. I just was trying to make a place to discuss this where the full board agreed that, that we did have the auspices to discuss.
No, I think that's fine. I like the fact that we have an avenue. I just think that it's thoroughly important that anybody be able to see it. So whether it's myself as a board member or my neighbor, anyone can pull it up and see it. So if we can amendment to state that it is recorded and it is viewable by all, then
Thank you.
Oh, hold on, Rebecca has.
And Ms. Hines had a hand up. I'm sorry, I recognized you, but he needed to finish, I think.
It's okay. Well, I kind of want to speak to both. Towards what Ms. Moore was saying, I believe that all of our committee meetings are now recorded and are supposed to be accessible online. And there's also, I know that there's been several meetings that, we kind of fixed this where you could zoom in and if you can't make it. Mm-hmm. And that's been helpful to me because like you, I work a full-time job and sometimes it's hard to actually get to the district office in afternoon traffic and all of those kind of things that come up. So that is helpful, and I do appreciate that we're now recording it. I think maybe one of the things that we could do is help promote maybe on our social media page or, when Dr. Ross sends out his weekly message, a link to, look to know that the procurement meeting is accessible. That's just my thoughts on that. I agree with you, Tiffany, and I agree with Mr. Lovelace on that. Mm-hmm. I did have a question on Mr. Lovelace's motion. It was pertaining to personnel for the procurement conversation. Did you say the word personnel in your motion?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I said, I think prescriptive, which
Okay.
means that we're going
Yeah,
to.
we couldn't talk about personnel.
Well, you could in executive session.
Yeah, we're going to make, some particular plans to address individual items on here
Right.
by prescription, and we would offer that to the administration to put in their procedures and suggest maybe some policies. But I'm not the chair of that committee, so, you know, but I would say to, you know, to address that, but that's what I had envisioned.
Well, I like the fact that you're trying to make a very specific place for this to be done. But I also totally agree that anything, even if it's live streamed and you're able to listen to it, it still needs to be bashed out with this whole board in front of the public, any policy change. And we've tried to be very transparent and very in doing that thus far. So, Ms. Suttle.
Since I am the chair of the procurement
Yeah,
committee and I've not said anything, I mean, I agree with it, and that's really what the purpose was, and we disbanded. We haven't met in a couple of months now because we had some things to address and we knew this was coming, but as you know, we spent, an hour in executive session on, you know, and it really wasn't even enough time. So, and there are things, I mean, we could go ahead and really get back to meeting because there's already some things from the preliminary audit that are finalized. And, you know, they're not working on those parts anymore. So I would be fine reconvening for that purpose. And again, streaming it, live stream, recording, all of that.
Do we need to add that wording to your motion, though? I guess since it's like Ms. Hines just said, are you okay with that? We're doing that, so we don't need to put that in. Thank you. All right, so all those in favor of Mr. Lovelace's motion, and that is 7-0, and that passes. Now, items, do we have
Ms.
any other
Hammond,
motion on that? We have one more.
I have another.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a really big topic. I move that as recommended by the JAG auditor in their executive summary of Phase 1 procurement examination report, the superintendent be directed to share the report in writing with the South Carolina Auditor, South Carolina Department of Education, South Carolina State Fiscal Accountability Authority, Division of Procurement Services of Audit and Certification, and to report the applicable personnel findings to the South Carolina Ethics Commission.
Is there a second? Ms. Gardner seconds.
So that was a mouthful, but
It was.
basically, in the report, the auditor recommended that we go ahead and give these agencies a heads up based on the preliminary audit findings. You know, just long story short, it's much more proactive than us showing up in the newspaper, which has happened with some of the other school districts in South Carolina. So the better way for them to know that we have already identified some problems is to go ahead and let them know and not make any judgments on it, just turn over the findings of the auditor.
Yes, that's not our job. That's right. We just turn it over. Any second? Do we have a second? You second. Any other questions? Ms. Hines?
I would, you know, I think we each have our own opinions on this, and I do think that in the draft audit, there have been really good issues that have been brought up, and that I look forward to seeing what comes of that and what recommendations to correct some of these actions we'll have. But I do think that it is still a draft. I don't understand why we would report something when we don't have all of the information. That's just how I feel. I understand that some other folks don't feel that way. And I think that when you start implicating employees, that you need to have all of the information together. I mean, I think it needs to be examined as a whole before you refer it, in my opinion, because I think that there are some exceptions in the specific situation that we're referring to, because we have, I mean, in my opinion, we have conflicting opinions from attorneys and auditors. So it doesn't make me feel comfortable giving incomplete information. I think we need to have thorough information submitted, and I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, I think that there are definitely going to be some results from this audit that will help the district moving forward. Like Mr. Lovelace said, what we really need to be focusing on is moving forward. So, I mean, we've spent a lot of money on this audit, and we need to at some point, we need to be moving forward with this. So that's my opinion, and I understand that not every board member has that opinion.
That's fine. Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ms. Blackburn-Hines that I disagree with the motion in the extent that it's a preliminary draft, that I feel this question should come up once we have a final draft. And if we're at a point to where we feel it's enough in the preliminary to turn in, do we feel like we're in a position, do we need to continue our contractual services with this accounting firm to continue the path they're going on?
Gotcha.
Ms.
My
Hammond,
piece.
I would like to point out, the executive summary is not a draft. It very clearly is not a draft. In fact, the auditor just texted me and said, the executive summary is not a draft. The other thing I'd like to point out, and I can read it out loud if I need to, but in the preamble to the executive summary, the auditor recommends that we do this. So this is word for word what the auditor recommends, and they are the expert on auditing. So, I mean, that's where this came from.
Ms. Moore?
As it was stated in what I have read and what seems to be wanting to go out in public, there are many things out there that are still in a gray area that we do not have a definite yes or no for. And I do feel as though until we have a definite yes or no, and until they clearly have all the information that they have requested, that it is very hurtful and harmful for us to put out information out there that could eventually be cleared.
Thank you. Mr. Lovett?
Yes, to answer that question, there were, from what I heard, and I think everybody heard, there were 3 topics of discussion, or 3 of the, I think there's probably 7 or 8 areas that we heard, and 3 of those were defined as complete, and there's no reason to delay something that was defined as complete from their standpoint. So I think that's, Ms. Huddle, you can speak to that, but I believe that's to which you refer.
Well, I'm referring to the executive summary, and again, the motion is to have these reported. And I'm going to read from this, okay, because we've already made a motion that it's public. So I'm going to read what they wrote. We have recommended to the former CFO, the superintendent, and the board to early alert the South Carolina Auditor, South Carolina Department of Education, the State Fiscal Accountability Authority, Division of Procurement Services, Office of Audit and Certification, and any other applicable oversight or law enforcement agencies that this engagement is in process. We have also recommended the superintendent report any ethics or other violations by staff who are certified continue. This is their recommendation, and I, as a board member, am not doing my job if I don't. It's almost like I'm trying to cover it up, and as they said in the Nixon years, the cover-up's worse than the crime. So, you know, everybody vote here how they want to, but we have an auditor who has been telling us to report this.
Yeah, I think in, well, Ms. Gardner, you hadn't weighed in, and then I'll weigh in. Would you like to, or I understand totally of not putting something out that isn't complete. But I had the conversation with this company that does this with many states, and it's very important that you let them know a preliminary finding. Now, were there some things in there that are still, she needed more, you know, she wanted more time, and we may or may not agree as a board to give that. But but her point is when something like this is going on, it's very important, just like we wrote the letter, and I know some of the board disagree with that, but her advice, who does this for a living, she's an auditor, not a lawyer. And believe me, we'll get legal counsel after, you know, as we finally get the preliminary. But right now, the auditor is saying that's how you handle this. You make a summary that's a preliminary summary, but there'll be no, there's no names, there's no vendors. It's a summary, and she told me that we needed to do that. So I'm just listening to her since we paid her a lot of money. It's kind of like paying to a doctor or a lawyer what they think we should do. That's her, what she does for a living. So that I agree with Ms. Huddle. Ms. Gardner, I'm just being sure everybody had a chance to talk.
I agree. I think as a board, I don't want to be the judge and jury of whether or not these things are right or wrong. I'd like to hand them to someone to tell us. And I think the preliminary report should, or the executive summary should be sent out as required or requested.
Mr. Hogan, I saw your hand again.
Just for clarification, the motion was to send out the executive summary, correct? Not the one that I've got titled draft?
Correct. It
No,
says,
not that.
confidential.
it says executive summary
Okay.
of phase one.
Totally different. And Ms. Hines, I'd like to address, I got worried, we didn't get it till last night, I didn't either. And she had told me we very much needed to have an executive summary that did not name any vendors, name any people. You know, it was something, but you owe it to the public, what have they got for what we've spent. And so, but she said that what you saw, that very detailed, that's not in this thing. This is just a summary of what she's doing. So I thank you for asking.
Well,
But-
but we just voted to make it public.
The executive summary, yes.
But if I can continue, I believe what I just asked was, were we going to turn in the draft report that they emailed us last night? We're going to turn in the executive summary that we just voted to make public.
The summary, yes.
Okay. And at that point, I guess the appropriate authorities that we're going to drop it off to are going to sit on it until we give them a final report?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding. If we vote to, you know, let them dig any deeper than what we all heard back there, okay? Any
Would
other?
you like me to reread it?
Yeah, let's do, and then let's call for the vote, because we need to,
Okay.
we got to go back for D, E, F, and G.
I move that, as recommended by the JAG auditor in their executive summary of Phase 1 procurement examination report, the superintendent be directed to share the report in writing with the South Carolina auditor, South Carolina Department of Education, South Carolina State Fiscal Accountability Authority, and South Carolina Division of Procurement Services, Office of Audit and Certification, and to report the applicable personnel findings to the South Carolina Ethics Commission.
So we had the motion, everyone's had a chance to speak, and we'll vote. All those in favor? And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those opposed, 2. So it carries 5-2. Ms. Gardner, you have a motion on that same item? 'Cause we can't, okay. Okay.
Okay, to start, in light of our new attorney policy, I move that the board obtain legal advice on the appropriate reporting of possible criminal audit findings to the appropriate federal, state, and/or local law enforcement or other agencies, and advise on possible civil remedies.
Is there a second? Ms. Huddle seconds. Would you like to explain that one?
Yes.
That's just in case?
Well, yeah, our new attorney policy says that we should be voting on whether or not we get counsel on things, and so this is if we've been told there's possible, and so we need to have that motion on the floor so that when it comes up, we can all agree that we needed counsel.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Hogan? Mr. Hogan?
Ms. Gardner, do you mind rereading the motion?
Reread it.
I move that the board obtain legal advice on the appropriate reporting of possible criminal audit findings to the appropriate federal, state, and/or local law enforcement or other agencies, and advise on possible civil remedies.
And civil remedies could mean if we could get any money back from anything wrong. Oh, thank you. All right. Any other statements?
So when it's all
questions?
said and done?
Yes.
So when it's all
Yes.
final and tied up in its pretty little bow? Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Hogan?
Just to be clear, the way that motion reads, we are going to obtain legal counsel to advise us on what to do, correct? So there'll be another vote as far as what makes the decision of the board for the action once we receive the final proposal. Okay.
Right. And that would be an executive session where everybody could ask legal counsel any kind of questions about this. All those in favor? Thank you. And that is 7 to no opposed.
One more. You ready?
You're on.
Okay. I move that we extend the appointment of JAG, which is our auditing company, until December 31st, 2022, to audit transactions associated with the 2008 bond referendum and all outstanding items from the Phase 1 report, not to exceed an additional $60,000 above the current contract.
Is there a second? Ms. Huddle seconds. Okay, Okay, do you want to explain that one?
Yeah, we have to extend the contract if we want
I
the
get that.
auditing company to continue what they've started. But we also wanted to include the 2008 bond referendum, because in my opinion, we're hopefully going to have another referendum, and we need to make sure that we're doing, just like Mr. Lovelace said, everything correctly, that we've corrected everything we've done wrong, that we move forward. But we assume, I'm just putting the 60,000 in there, that could change, but that's going to be equivalent to about 400 man-hours for them.
And I think that she told us she needed a lot more than 100 hours.
Right, and that's about 400, so, but that way, if it gets to this point, we have to come back and vote on it
Yeah,
again.
you can't spend more than that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that? Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Ross, do you mind me asking, remind me, how much we've currently spent?
So to date, we are at $51,200.
And do you happen to recall when we passed this, what the number was that we all agreed upon?
46,000.
Okay, thank you, I was just asking.
Okay. So we're already over, what's our math there?
$5,200.
Okay.
Ms. Hammond?
Yeah. Ms. Hines?
So, and just to recap what the original motion was when we hired JAG for this audit, it was 2017 through to the present, right? Is that correct, Dr. Ross?
It was for the fiscal years 2018-19, 19-20, 20-21, and there was an option to audit additional years of 2016-17, 17-18.
So this motion goes back almost 10 years prior to where the auditor is before she has completed the report on the information that she's looking for based upon that motion, correct? And that's cost $52,000?
51,200, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Go ahead, I had a question.
One, I was just going to say, while we were in there, I mean, I believe, if my math is correct, that there's no way that we are going to get what is needed for $60,000 by December. It's just not going to happen.
Well, what I would say to that, you could be totally right, but if the items they asked for that we've just gone through, and they had gotten them on a timely manner, it would have been a lot less hours.
But that's not on us, that's on them, and we can't guarantee
it's
nor
on
It
can
wasn't
they
on them,
guarantee.
it was, Ms. Moore, it really wasn't on them, it was the people they contacted to get.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
but that's not on us.
They didn't try to keep it
But it's on
going.
our dollar.
Okay, well, what I'm going to say, and you vote your conscience on it. What I'm saying is, if this is what we saw back there, that we can't talk about any details, if you feel like it's important, some of it is already settled. Some of it's going to guide us to do a lot better procurement systems in this.
Don't let my fiscal responsibility make anyone believe that I don't believe that we need to be doing better, because we do. But I also respect our community and am fiscally responsible enough to know that we are already over budget, and we are asking now to go even more so over budget. So they're very, very different.
I get you. I didn't mean you didn't. I was making my point. My point is that's for what we would get out of that, it's worth the money. I agree with you. We have overspent, but in my mind, that's not overspending for what we're getting. But that's me.
I have something to say to that. Okay, I hold in my hand, the auditor was talking about a audit report back there in the back that they couldn't find. Okay? This is dated April 4th, 2014. The report hidden from the public showed that the district paid the construction manager $518,221.65 in addition to the fee, in additional fees to do fewer projects with a less dollar volume. The construction manager claimed $234,000 in delay damages, which were reimbursed while the Derrick Pond Elementary School was never built. The audit was hidden and referred to as attorney work product. The audit report should have been seen by the public who paid for the report, not filed away in an attorney's file drawer and labeled attorney work product. The prior board did that and paid those people $50,000 to put it away and $10,000 for the audit. Now, I want to know, and I think everybody in our community wants to know, that this would never happen again with a bond referendum. And you're asking, our superintendent is asking us to consider a bond referendum and bring it before the people. And here we go, and we're talking about spending $60,000, but these people threw away $518,000 of our money.
Mr. Loveth, I agree with you, but we're going to keep this on. I know why you just said that. You're kind of making the point I was making. That is over our budget. Ms. Moore is fiscally conservative. I think that's great. I think we all are. I think all 7 of us are. But what I am saying is, to his example he just gave, this doesn't sound like a lot of money for what you're going to save.
Well,
is that what you're saying,
I
Mr.
mean,
Loveth?
public's trust is worth $50,000, $60,000. I mean, that to me, I mean, well, I think that we need to make sure that our public understands that this board stands for what it says, and that we're not going to sit in here and look the other way while things go on. $518,000 is a lot of money in my book, and that's in 2014 dollars.
Well, I agree, but let's move forward. Ms. Hines.
I agree that there are things that the draft report, I mean, they have raised good issues that need to be addressed. And I think that questioning what those fees are going to be to finish that investigation, that doesn't mean that we think that there shouldn't be an investigation. I think that it's just irresponsible to have a blank check and continue down a path without some kind of framework of how much we are looking to spend to get this information. And I understand the issue regarding the 2008 bond referendum, but this motion says that we're going to extend a contract for $60,000 from now until December. And the bond that the bond that the district wants the board to vote on and go before the voters is already going to be voted on before we get to that next step. And now that we've added so much time that she has to go back and investigate, if it's to find out what happened to the 2008 bond referendum before the bond is, after the bond is voted on in November, it's not going to be produced in time to provide reassurance to voters. I think that I understand the need for an audit. I do not disagree, but I question what a reasonable fee is, and the fact that we're taking so much money away from education, the needs of education, I just think that needs to be balanced, and we need more definite parameters on what to expect to pay. And we also, Dr. Ross, I would love to know where these funds are being pulled for to pay for the auditor.
In terms of the funds, Connie, do you know what account we're pulling this? Is this contractual services?
Contractual services. Ms. Huddle.
I'd like to point out some numbers from the executive summary, okay? Because in my opinion, we're talking about being penny wise and pound foolish. In the executive summary, this district spent $178,000 on sewer taps that we never got. We never used, they expired. You might as well have walked up to a toilet and flushed $178,000 of the taxpayers' money down the toilet. And I, for one, want to make sure that we know why that happened and what we need to change so it never happens again. We overspent above the contract $7.8 million on temporary help. $7.8 million. I, for one, want to find out how that happened and make sure it never happens again. We spent, and this is why the 2008 bond referendum matters, we spent $1.2 million on attorney's fees that were charged to that bond referendum? No. Will we know all the answers? But no, at least the public will know we're going to get them, and we will not allow that to happen again. Why is this taking so long? Because if you've ever gardened and you've gone to dig a rock out of your garden, you put your spade in and you think you have a little rock, and you keep digging because the rock, and you find out the rock is bigger, and you have to keep digging. That is what's happening here. They started off and they found the $1.2 million in attorney's fees, and then they found these journal entries that we don't have, so that's why it's taking so long. Second thing is it's taking so long because they're not getting exactly great responses from the vendors. So, that takes time. And then the third thing is they haven't had time yet to tell us how to fix this. They haven't finished finding all the problems, so they haven't had time to tell us how to fix it. This will also be literally money wasted if we don't spend a little bit more to find out what we need to do to make sure this never happens again.
And Ms. Huddle, I would say to that point, and it's sort of an argument to Ms. Hines, yes, that bond, if we vote for that, and it would be December's after the November bond, if we vote to go for it, we have been doing our job, and they will know we're trying to get to the bottom and make it better. And you can always make an amendment if you want to lower the amount of $60,000. You're welcome to make that amendment. Mr. Hogan.
Can I make an amendment to the motion?
You certainly can.
The amendment I'd like to make, and I might need help kind of drafting it up, but is there a way, I guess I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that the contract not exceed December 31st, 2022 with a fee of $60,000 with 3 updates when they reach the $20,000 increment. I think giving them a blank check of $60,000 is irresponsible for us because I feel that we gave them 45, they took 51. So bringing out 60, I think that we should get updates after every $20,000 that's spent. And if they come to a point to where they're continuing to look and we do not feel they're going to continue finding anything, we can have the opportunity to pull the plug on it.
Okay.
Kind of round up, I apologize.
No, that's all right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I follow you. The only thing you're not saying that if we get the update at 20,000 and then you get to the 60, then you wouldn't give them, you won't even leave it open to give more.
I apologize. I got the hamster running in my head right now trying to figure this out, but I would like an update after $20,000 spent. And if we feel it's still beneficial, then I think we have a vote to continue for another 20,000 and a vote for another 20,000, not to exceed 60.
Okay.
Chairwoman Hammond, at some point, there's going to come a time where they say we can't find any more information. And if at that point we were 40,000 in, we could save the district $20,000.
Okay. We have to have a second to that first. You seconding that, Mr. Second? Ms. Huddle, second your amendment. All right, let's discuss it. Ms. Gardner.
I need clarification because we're just getting updates, but we don't have to vote each time to continue the contract. But since it'll be on the agenda, we'll have the ability to terminate it, but we don't have to vote every time.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Any other comments to his amendment?
Yeah, I do. Part of what we're looking into here is with these attorney's fees, for example. Okay, they took those attorney's fees and illegally capitalized those fees. Okay, and what that means is that we put that over. We put attorney's fees, and we're paying all these millions of dollars in attorney's fees that go over 30 years because we're paying interest and all that on it. We got to know better than this, guys. I mean, if you're talking about $20,000 to know whether we capitalize millions of dollars of fees that went over 30 years, I mean, this is a lot of money, guys, and we got to know what happened in that regard. I mean, this isn't, and they haven't had a chance to look back at this. Like Ms. Huddle said, they've just gotten to the tip of the rock. The rock's underground.
And some of it, though, it's finalized.
Some of it they have, but not nearly all of what went on in that bond referendum. There were 100 adjusting entries that they haven't to look through, 100.
Well, let me go back to Mr. Hogan's amendment, because he made it and we had a second. So it's really only the only change in the original one, you want some updates.
Yeah,
So that
correct.
everybody hears, what we're getting for that money.
An update of new material once they've reached 20,000 in billing,
Okay.
not to
And
exceed 60.
not to exceed 60. So we still have the original of $60,000. Did you leave the date in there that we had for
December
December?
31st, 2022.
Okay, all right. Ms. Moore?
I just wanted to go back to what we were talking about and discuss this rock that we're digging for. I get and understand the money and how we have done things wrong, but what Mr. Lovelace just showed us is a prime example of one of the things that is concerning me, because that date for that letter is way off of the dates that they are supposed to be looking for. So I truly feel that we're not sticking to what we asked them to do, that they are digging deeper, and that's great, that's wonderful, but we're paying for it. So either we stick to the dates that we have requested.
Or you add the dates with a motion? What you want to do?
Well, no, because it was in the original one. Like on the letter, it clearly states what the dates are, the years are that they're supposed to be looking for. But in that information that we have, it clearly states that we're going further than those dates. So I feel that we may be able to save some money and get this done a little faster if we stick to what it is that they're supposed to be looking for.
Well, I could clear that up right now. They didn't ask for that document. My wife had that document because she was on the school board.
And
I
it's
just
public.
showed it to you for that purpose. But I didn't have the date, and nobody had that date.
Talk nice.
I get where you're coming from, but it has nothing to do with what we're currently talking about. I understand that we are trying to clear up things that have been done wrong in the past, but what you showed us, yes, was done wrong in the past, but it has nothing to do with this current vote. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
We've got a construction management at risk project going on right now, and we don't have any process in place.
But we're going to get it.
But we're getting there.
How are we going to do that unless we know
Hey, guys.
what we're doing?
Y'all
But
got to
bringing
quit
up
talking to
stuff
each
from
other. You have
years
to
and years
talk to
ago
me.
is not getting us there, Ken.
Okay, Miss Moore, talk to me. Both of your points are important to you and to your constituents, but we don't talk back and forth to each other. Please, if y'all will just raise your hand, keep your voice nice, kind, because we're doing good work here, and I'm proud of this board. Let's go back to this motion. I think in defense of Mr. Lovelace, I get it. He's given us examples of money, huge amounts of money. And yet we're sitting here worrying about what we are going to get for $60,000. So I think we need to call for this vote on your amendment. I've got to vote on the amendment. So we're not changing the date. I want to be sure we're right. The same date as the original motion. But you're adding, we get the updates of at $20,000 has been sent. Okay? All those in favor of the amendment? Okay? And that is 1, 2, 3, 4. And those opposed to the amendment is 3. Okay? It carries 4-3. Thank you, Mr. Hogan. We got to go back to the original. Well, it's going to be what he did. All right. So the original motion with the amendment. All those in favor? And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that carries 5-2. Thank you. I hope we're through with it. Y'all see why we stayed back there so long? We had a whole hour. So we have to go back for D, E, F, and G, and we will come back out here and vote on any issues that needed voting on those. So the next is Dominion Energy Easement Request, Exhibit F.
I'm going to ask Mr. Dave Wiseman, who's joining us in his first role as Interim Director of Operations, and we appreciate him coming forth to present us the Dominion Energy Easement Request.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, board members, Dr. Ross. I bring to you one recommendation from Dominion to approve an easement on district property up at Chapin High School to allow us to run a power line from their utility pole back to the practice field where we just recently installed new lighting. We need to upgrade the power system. So in order to put all that together, we have to get an easement or give them an easement to our property.
Any questions? Seeing none, that's on our action agenda.
Question.
Okay.
Is that an overhead easement? In other words,
No, sir, it'll be an underground easement. They will bore underneath the road so that it's not disrupting that. We're trying to get it in place before it starts getting darker sooner.
okay, so the easement is issued for our purposes and for our benefit,
Yes, sir.
not some off-site.
No, sir, just on our property underneath their overhead power lines back to the practice field.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there a motion for this, Mr. Lovelace?
I make a motion under item 16, action agenda, that Dominion Energy easement request be granted.
Is there a second? Ms. Moore seconds. Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor? And that is 7-2, no opposed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Third and final reading, approval of the FY 2022-2023 general fund budget that we had earlier. We don't need to, we kind of had that, so do you want to, you're easy. Now, we did have some public participation that came up about the fund balance, and it's kind of interesting, that was my question, because usually you don't use fund balance for reoccurring, so that may be the only thing, since we only had one public, and you did kind of answer that for me. It's more of a one-timer for you.
That's correct. Yeah, I wanted to use that. We took, again, not knowing what our final numbers are going to be, knowing that we're going to go forward with a mid-year adjustment of this budget, but staffing is critical now. And if I got caught in a situation last year where we had 72 hours to try to create this program. I see value in the program. 2 weeks after its institution, we had a 33% reduction in behavior at one site. I think our principals are requesting this more and more, and I believe the administration believes these are 3 sites that could, to do it. I want to stand on the principal's recommendation. So my goal is putting an assignment now as we can secure the staff. We come back at mid-year adjustment, and we can roll it into general fund. We have that option there.
So is there a motion for that? Yeah, well, I just wanted to let him sort of introduce it again. We've just had it in the preliminary meeting.
Dr. Ross, you ran through this kind of barefooted, but I wrote it down, and I think we can make all the motions.
Yeah, you do the motion now, and then, yeah.
I was going to make it all in one motion, but I didn't know whether that was.
Well, this is third and final.
Okay, here's what I was going to do. I was going to say, I make the motion that number 1, that we approve the 2022-2023 fiscal year budget in the amount of $212,481,590 to balance. That 2, that we approve 246.1 operating mills, and 3, that we approve 69.5 debt service mills, and 4, that we approve $1,529,112 worth of assignments in one category, and that number 4, we include a $1.3 million worth of assignments in another category.
So that's all one motion, but you just broke it down to those 4 parts that he had.
Well, we can either do that or have one motion for each line item. I mean, it's whatever you want, but I thought it would be expeditious to do it this way. So.
Mr. Lovelace, instead of categories, because this is going to go into the minutes, can you say what those, you say for a category and then you say for another category? I'm just asking, could we maybe say what they are?
Yes, ma'am, if I can find it. Would everybody tell me what page it's on? The nest page, okay. Oh, here it is, okay. So it's for additional FTEs, the $1,529,112 is for additional FTEs needed, and he's got average salaries on that. Okay. Staffing for the NEST program. Okay, that was number 4, item 4, and item 5 then is the snack program assignments for $1.3 million. And if I didn't get that right, I'm sorry.
So it's basically from your, well, let's keep them together and have the second, Ms. Gardner. Now, is there anyone that has a specific question on any one part of that you have a problem with? I mean, if we're all for it as it is. Ms. Gardner, I saw first.
This might not be a question, but just a request. If maybe in a near future board meeting, if we could have a report on the nest, maybe just some ideas, or maybe some even if you've taken surveys, or I don't know, something to help us know how it's working out, or how it did work out. I know it's probably done now, but maybe, I don't know, we might have to wait till school starts again too for you to do that, but I'm interested to know, an update on that, so.
We will certainly provide continuing updates on this intervention. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Hines?
I have a question, and then I'm going to make an amendment to the motion. And the question I have is not related to the amendment, and I omitted to ask it earlier. But I've had several people reach out to me because they have seen things in the news, and they asked that I ask this question, and it's related to federal funding and how it is tied to federal policies, and whether or not certain things like rules about bathrooms in schools, if policies aren't implemented, if we would lose federal funding. There's been a conversation in the media about that across the country, and I've had folks ask me that question, so I just would like to get some clarification from you on as we're talking about the budget.
Ms. Miller, do you have any idea about any title series and any strings attached to that?
I'm not sure that I got the full scope of the question, but I mean, there are certainly federal regulations when it comes to our federal monies that we have and that we receive, guidelines that we have to follow.
Well, I think that some folks have expressed some concerns about our bathroom policies related to gender identity. And there has been news articles that have tied opening up bathrooms to everyone. And if that policy isn't implemented by districts, that they would lose funding. And I just wanted clarification for the public on whether or not we have heard anything like that.
We have not.
Okay, and whether
No,
or not it was tied. I just wanted to make sure that I asked that question in
I
public.
appreciate that, yes.
And
What
so
we
that
do
answer is
have
no. Okay.
in a lot of our title series are obligations in terms of poverty and those kind of things, and special education. That's it.
Okay, and I would like to amend the motion.
Okay.
And I move that we separate the NEST programs from the proposed budget that was in the original motion.
You want to take it out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Are you asking to split the question? You're
Wait a
asking
minute.
to
Well, we
divide
have
the
to-
question?
It's an amendment to his.
So I'm amending Mr. Lovelace's motion to remove the three NEST programs from the rest of the budget in that motion.
Okay, and you second it, Ms. Okay.
And the reason I think that we need to separate that out of the motion is because I don't feel like I've gotten enough information about what is actually happening on a day-to-day basis from the NEST at Irmo High School. And I've heard different things from different parents regarding concerns in those schools. And, what we hear is everything good that happens. And I think, Ms. Moore made a reference to this earlier about how at each school, the NEST is, the principal is still in charge of the NEST, and there's not an administrator, a solid principal to that NEST program, even though it's technically a separate school within a school. And that puts a burden on the administration that's trying to operate the rest of the school. And I've seen and heard of concerns about that at Irmo. So to add 2 new programs without really knowing how that's going to be implemented, And, from what I know of the nest at Irmo High School is it's been kids that are struggling and having, specific issues. And when we're talking about putting one at an elementary school, I don't know that I'm comfortable with that yet. And so I don't want to vote on, $1.5+ million out of our fund balance without actually seeing how the nest is successful at Irmo High School and getting, true reports. Because every program that we do will have criticism. That doesn't mean to not have it, but we don't hear the criticism. And we don't see, how we can improve a program. So from my perspective, I just think that, that may be something that we revisit. But for purposes of this budget, that's my motion.
Any other comment on the amendment? Yeah.
Who on the board has been to visit the nest? Mr. Lovelace? Okay. I'm just disturbed because, we're here as a board our biggest function is the budget. And I don't know anything about education other than I've been a student. And I have to trust Dr. Ross that he believes that this is the best thing for our students. He gave us information that it was 30% in reduction in referrals. I've been to the nest and I've been in regular classrooms, and I can tell you I thought it was amazing. And we have a discipline issue in our schools, and to hear that it's down 30%, I mean, I know not everybody on this board was here at the time, but we approved a whole lot more for 5. And, nobody even wanted results or to talk about the budget or anything. It was just, yay, let's do 5 with no information. So I trust Dr. Ross. I trust the results that he's seen, and he says that this is a good thing to do. And I like the fact, I hear from the public about the operating fund, but I like the fact this is still operating fund. We're just setting it separate, and it's kind of like a project, and that's what you do with a project. You say, hey, we're going to set this aside, we're going to measure it, we're going to monitor it, and if it works, we're going to come back and say, yeah, let's put it in their regular budget. If it doesn't work, we're going to come back and adjust it. So
I'd like to say to that, as a teacher, I have had countless number of elementary teachers tell me thank you for even considering it in elementary. And if you're not in there's some of the schools that it'll be a surprise to you to need the nest, but there are schools that need it. There are elementary teachers that when you're dealing with small children and, they really don't know how to act in the room, but yet they need special love and attention. And we have elementary teachers that sometimes are kicked and spit on. And I'm really proud of this program.
In answer to one of the objections that was brought up, in the proposed assignment, it's got an assistant principal at Irmo High School, and that was, and then at the Dutch Fork Elementary School, there's another assistant principal. So those 2 nests will have administrative help if we so give that vote tonight. The other thing is that I visited, and I know I didn't visit them all, but I visited all but 7 schools in our district this year, and I had 5 principals that elementary schools give resounding approval, and they wanted a nest. I mean, they asked for that, okay? So it wasn't like somebody was imposing on them. They asked, because they understand. They understand that they have to have, some additional love and discipline and so forth so that the rest of the kids, can go ahead and move ahead. And the ones that are in the nest will get that love and attention, and they'll be able to do that. So, I mean, that's what, I'm not an educator, but that's what they told me. So, I mean, I have to believe that they know what they want.
And I agree with Ms. Huddle about we have to, he's already brought us in a half a year this data of how discipline went down with the nest. Mr. Hogan?
Appreciate it, Chair Hammond. I seconded the motion because I do feel that every one of us needs an opportunity to speak. With that being said, I mean, it's no secret I am a big fan of the nest. Question I got for Dr. Ross, the only question is the power still in the pivot? Is the power still in the pivot?
The power is always in the pivot.
That's all I need to hear. Thank you.
I would encourage, talk to principals.
Yeah,
That's who this came from. Talk to teachers and that, if you don't believe me, but we need interventions, and we need them as soon as possible.
And I want to thank Mr. Lovelace. He says he didn't know anything about education. He knows all about construction. But you were so right. If you knew the number of teachers, and we talk about this, if other people, good parents that will care about their kids learning, and they could see in the classroom some of these kids that just can't pay attention and can't function well in the structured, regular classroom, and your child is not learning because that teacher's taking so many minutes out of the day. Sit down, Matt. Matt, you got to sit down. Matt. And how'd you like that? And I'm not making a joke, but and they're not even doing anything real bad. You know, it may just be they can't sit still, but you're taking time away from little Rebecca, who's made an A over there, and Matt keeps talking. So I'm the teacher, and I keep taking the time away from all those good kids wanting to learn. This nest takes those kids that can't function as well there and give them that special. And like Mr. Lovelace said, they grow out of that. But I mean, I can't tell you, it's because I did question it being in the fund balance. Because I've been on this for almost 16 years. I fussed about what do you do with all that money of the taxpayer you keep keeping. This is one way that I think we're doing the right thing, and it's like Ms. Huddle said, it's like a project, and we'll decide if you get to keep it in the real budget. Ms. Moore.
No, I agree. I've had a lot of conversation with Dr. Ross, and I think that schools have requested this. I know the teachers and the principals that I have chatted with are excited about this. I do think that one of the things that we are probably all wanting to know, Ms. Gardner asked earlier at the start of this conversation, and I think that it's one of the things that Ms. Hines is asking for as well, is just more information. And I know the program was short-lived in the sense of how quickly we had it at the end of the year, but I think something that we're all wanting to know is just what will it look like? What will those numbers look like? How will those kids succeed? Like, what will that turn into with reading intervention and math intervention and all of those sorts of things, just so that we can see that this money has been invested properly. And so I think it's just a combination of, yes, we want our kids to we want this for our teachers and our admin, but we also just want to see those numbers for these students as well.
I think that's very fair.
Ms. Miller, I know you'll be heading up the committee that's going to put a little bit more time in it. These wraparound, it's kind of the umbrella on steroids, and so you've worked more intimately on how this lays out. Can you explain kind of some of the things that we're including in this NEST program?
We have, absolutely. And I will let you know, I think they're good questions, and we have the same questions too. Did it work or not? And what do we need to keep that we did well, and what do we need to look at revamping or adjusting or changing? We have committees, our directors will be getting together, but we've actually already started some of the work on looking at the NEST. What went well? What will we keep? What does that basic structure look like from those successful points? We've also visited a couple of other districts to look at some things that they're doing. We do know that we had success. What was the degree of that success? We can bring that to you once we finish, looking at everything and get all of our results back, especially academically. We know behaviorally, what it did. We know, those of us who have visited the NEST, we know what we saw, with our own eyes there, that smaller environment, that nurturing environment, that administrator, those teachers, the wraparound services of our psychologists, our school counselors, our special education classes. So we'll have a lot more on, what did that academics look like? What was the self-regulation? What did that look like? Going back into the regular classes, the school building of theirs. But there are tremendous benefits to students being able to have that school within a school, within their own school. and being able to do that. And if we can intervene, at that point and keep that, then it is tremendous. And we have heard nothing but positives from the teachers and administrators. And these tweaks that Dr. Ross is bringing forward, these are some of the tweaks that we see that we need to be able to successfully implement that at the other schools.
And Ms. Miller, we know as teachers, if we get them early trained, that elementary is such a key.
Right.
It's just a key to their success later, middle and high school. Let's vote on that amendment from Ms. Hines. Yes.
Can I just say a couple of things? I understand that there are people that are supportive of the nest. What I am saying is, I've been in elementary schools too. I may not talk about it all the time, but I have been in elementary schools, and I have been in different situations in different schools, and I know that there are people that are supportive of this. But I'm going to give you an example of something that happened to me recently, and it's not the only time that this has happened, and the only reason I am going to relay this story is because this employee no longer works for our district. But I was in jury duty recently, and there was a break where everybody was, leaving the courtroom and going to the bathroom, and there was just, there was a break. And I was talking to the gentleman next to me, and all of a sudden, this lady comes up to me and asks to speak with me. And I didn't know who she was. She pulls me into the hallway, and she literally burst into tears because she had worked at Irmo this year and did not feel safe. She felt like the nest was not helping, and she was very, very upset. And she is not the only person that I have heard say that. And I've heard folks say that they're scared to talk to the administration or to go against that. And, whether or not that's legitimate or, it's just emotion, I take that into account. I've talked to parents that have also expressed concern. And so when I hear things like that, I don't hear, what Ms. Miller just said was great, that they've seen successes and where they need to make adjustments and what's worked. Well, when I'm thinking about appropriating money out of our fund balance, I want to know that before now. I want to know what it looks like at the middle and elementary school level. I understand this is probably going to, the budget's probably going to pass like it was presented, and that's, all well and fine. But I have the opinion, as one board member, I don't believe that we should always have the same opinion. We all have different interactions with our community, that there are questions I have before we spend, $1.5 million on this program. And it's okay if it passes. That's just where I'm coming from on this.
I appreciate that. Let's vote on that amendment. All those in favor? 3? This is the amendment, her amendment. So, what do you mean, take it out?
It means not to pass it.
It was the amendment. You want me to read it again? It was, well, he made his motion was to pass the budget as it is. She made a motion to go everything in the amendment, but take the nest out. So those in favor of taking the nest out of the amendment, of the budget, raise your hand. So there are 2, and all those against that amendment, and that is 5. So it fails 5-2.
Okay.
So now we go back to your original motion.
And I'd like to speak to that in just a second.
And then we'll vote.
One of the things that I found exciting about your presentation tonight was that we as a board have not raised the millage for the operational millage at all. And I ran the numbers here just a second, and I see that because we haven't done the look back and because we haven't, increased the millage to where we could have, so this is an opportunity cost, I guess you could look at it that way, is that we saved the taxpayers $7,758,531. And that goes to small businesses, okay? So for those of us that believe that small businesses are the engine of our community, that's what we've been trying to do as a board. And I want to say congratulations to all of us for trying to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Lovis. Yep, Ms. Huddle?
Before we vote, I would just like to ask that Ms. Gardner consider, I think a member of the public had a very valid point about our fund balance, and that we just, in the next policy committee, or the next available policy committee, that we just review the policy on the fund balance.
That's a good suggestion. All right, all those in favor of passing this budget as it appears, and that is 7-0. Passes. Good. Thank you. Thank you. We are now at item 18, and then we have to go back into executive session. Update regarding a potential bond referendum in the amount not to exceed $150 million to be held on November 8, 2022.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is an update, so no action is required whatsoever on our building a strong educational foundation. Usually I start off with the notion of fair and poor rated facilities, and you've heard that, but I think what's important for us to do is to start off with really the condition of now, talking about what we're currently facing. If you look at our accountability office has presented our 135th day look at our district in terms of in-person enrollment from 2013. And 25% of all in-person students were in the Chapin area, 38% in Dutch Fork, 36.4% in Irmo. If you look at this year's 135th day report, and the difference between the 2013, you'll see that there is a increase, a 12.9, almost 13% increase in-person enrollment in all the Chapin schools, 7.7 reduction in Dutch Fork, and a 5.71% reduction in the Irmo schools. But if you look at the buildings that we have 6 zone schools in that Chapin area, 7 zone schools in the Dutch Fork, and 8 zone schools in Irmo. When we look at the elementary school occupancy within these schools, you'll see that the darker areas represent areas of high concentration or high utilization rates within those schools, particularly concerns with Lake Murray Elementary School and Chapin Elementary School. I don't have the map, but I look at the graph for the high and middle schools, and you see that Chapin High School at a utilization rate of 90% causes concerns, and Chapin Intermediate School at 85.2% causes some concerns, because as projected, these areas are growing. When we look at our 180th day report, we saw an increase. And so as we come back and look at 45, we may have almost 40% of the students in our district in person going to the Chapin area. We presented this to the community for their input. We had a virtual a potential bond referendum forum, a superintendent's parent advisory cabinet, a virtual bond referendum lunch and learn, superintendent's faculty committee. We did 2 in-person potential bond discussions with the community, and we did a community feedback survey with over 1,094 responses. Each one of them preferred option 3, and the majority was for phase 3. So when we asked for our board to look at these options, we've eliminated option 2 and 4. But I want us to look at option 1 as, again, this is discussion. We had, after Special Agent Lackey came and discussed with us with the FBI, we have crossed out adding portables to high-capacity schools. In our report, it was not advised that you can't harden a building and then put children in portables. That doesn't go together. So we need to look at what our school district looks like with all students in the building, out of portables and in the building. That changes the map a little bit. And that means that, and we haven't addressed that in executive session, but that needs, that the motion that was made for the demographer, that's another part that we're going to add, is bringing every student out of a portable into this building. So there's costs associated with that. And then option 3, living at our current millage rate, was just set at 69.5 meals. So again, we've eliminated option 2 and option 4, crossed out the adding the portables to the high capacity schools or any school within our district. So when we look at phase 1, it will be our recommendation, pending the approval of the demographer, to balance the district using this configuration, using the GIS mapping to determine where students will go, using our capacity numbers to determine how best to place students in an environment that looks as phase 1, or phase 3, in which we would again have a map that would show this option. That way the community could see if a bond is not pursued or fails, where their student would be attending school, or if it passes, where their child would attend school. We want to show here our existing financial position. This is our current debt under option 1. You can see that with our annual maintenance that we approved in the Irmo High School project, we've maxed out our capacity on 2023. So we would have to use each, the capacity, and this again is growing at 1.5% annually in terms of what we would see in assessed values. So that's a very conservative growth, but this is the capacity in which we would have to address our facilities under option 1. Again, under option 3, this would be a $0 increase per 100,000 fair market value to the taxpayer, so they would not see an increase in tax rate, but this would allow us to get the money to address the plan under option 3. I will say that you don't see the projects here because we will we will make the next presentation, will include the recommendations from the FBI and SLED. Mainly, how do we add those security buffers on the front of every school? And so I want to make that point very clear, that when this presentation comes back to this board, it will include these security items that we can't put in the current budget that may need to be addressed through a bond referendum. We're taking that time to review that, to get that information together. I thought it was Ronald Reagan who made it up, but it's actually a Russian proverb that was taught to him, but he made it famous, the notion of trust but verify. And so when it comes to administrations, I resign and anybody trust us. It's not going to be I don't need to say trust me, so just verify me. So I want to ask for increased verification, checks and balances. I am, if this passes, committing to a community bond referendum verification advisory. I'm not committing the committee to you, but I will take this on, where this group would meet quarterly during the life of the bond referendum to review the expenditures and the pending policies that this committee comes up, especially from what we're hearing from the JAG report. That community would have that oversight. It can consist of 6, 9, or 12 members with equal representation from the geographical areas of Chapin, Dutch Fork, and Irmo. So it could be 2 members from each, 3 members from each, or 4 members from each. And that it would be chaired by one of the members of the board. So while it's a superintendent's advisory, it has a community chair. And that this advisory will meet quarterly and actually report quarterly their findings to the board in open session. And so we would leave it to you to appoint those members. You hear people from the community who say, I don't trust Dr. Ross, don't trust that district. And so you can be a part of the verification advisory, where if you trust yourself, you can be a part of it to give us feedback. I think when it comes to the needs of our students, our faculty and staff, we cannot miss out on these needs. And so, you know, to the former point, if someone comes to you and they have issues with any of the programs we bring, they don't trust our recommendations, ask them for a solution. The absence of anything, if we don't do anything, if we don't put a solution on the ground, it might not have to be mine, but if we don't have a solution, that's where I think we find issues. So this verification piece allows us to continue to provide what I believe is this whole child continuum for today's students, today's teachers, today's staff in our community. That concludes the update on regarding the potential bond referendum in the amount of $150 million to be held on November 8th, 2022.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. And then for the public, we will go back into executive session to handle D, E, F, and G, and we will come back out here because there could be a vote on that.
Can I ask some questions from what he was
sure.
saying? I have 4. One, and I can take turns if other board members have. One, Dr. Ross, do you know how many portables we have throughout the district? Because that's going to play into all of this, right?
We are currently, we do not, I do not.
Approximately 16.
16?
Okay.
All right.
Are they all at one school?
No, ma'am.
That's its own school. Does anybody have anything
No,
else?
but seriously, which school has the most? I'd like to know.
Lakebury Elementary.
Okay.
Interesting. Doesn't, go ahead.
Okay, Matt, was that?
Well, I have 3 more, but I was
All
going to
right, let's go to, you want to just do all 3 now?
Okay.
All right, and then Matt's next.
I think the advisory board is a great idea. My question is, it says that the board will appoint the members. Is there an application process, or do we just pick people that we know? And also, are there terms for the advisory board, for the participants?
So once is my understanding of how this works, and I'm looking at a model in Orangeburg, they're also doing the exact same one. And you put out who would like to be a part of the advisory board. You have Irmo, Chapin, and Dutch Fork areas. You get those names, you bring them back in the executive, you can determine who you would like, and then the board makes a slate of nominations for those to be voted on in public, and then those people agree to serve for the life of the bond.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all, if for any reason, member 1 from Dutch Fork says, I need to step off, then we would go back to that list to appoint a replacement for that person.
Okay. And then I have a question about the redistricting study. And I know we're going back into executive session, and so maybe that's a better place to ask the question. Do you think? It's general. It's not about a contract.
I think you can ask it now, and then,
Okay.
and then
My question is, does a redistricting study include like a growth study or projection? Is that included in that, or are those supposed to be separate?
So we have the ability to negotiate it. This group that we're asking to do now is to map as is today. So how would we cover our current enrollments, moving everyone out of the portables? How would we? So this group would be pulling our current 135th data. We do have projection data from the McKibben's report that we can provide, but it would be a map of if the referendum was to fail and we have to get every student out of the portables, how would we do that today?
Okay. And then my last question was, are we voting on the question to be put on the ballot on July 11th or August 8th? Those are the 2 board meetings we have left before that question has to be submitted to.
I would ask the board to maybe hold out to the August 8th meeting, before a final determination needs to be met, or possibly consider a scheduled special call meeting prior to August 15th to give us those options.
Is that good, Ms. Hines? Okay. Mr. Hogan?
Nothing to do with what she was asking about. Dr. Ross, the remaining items on executive session, D, E, F, and G, is there any action that's necessary?
There would be action on G, which is the demographer that would be doing the redistricting.
So I was going to say we should table until next meeting, but if there's action, we can go ahead.
Yeah, we need to do,
And we asked our attorney to stay.
and our attorney stayed all this time. That's why I was trying to go in there and then do questions afterwards. Ms. Huddle?
I'll be fast.
Yeah.
I don't have a question about the bond referendum, but I do have a request, and it's just coming from me, so it's not coming from the whole board. But you put forth your presentation, and these are coming from you, which is great. You're the superintendent. But when Pineywood was built, the millage rate was raised to 69.5, and the public was told it would go down. And it feels a little like we say, oh, well, we've got 69.5, so ooh, let's spend it. And that, I would just like to see another option that is not using the full millage rate and is looking at another alternative that does not include building any new schools. That all we do is look at adding on to existing schools if possible. Because I think we're hitting really rough economic times for people, and I understand the millage rate isn't going up, but taxes still are because assessments are going up. And, you know, when you have $4 Oreos on sale in the grocery store, that's like scary. So I would just like to look at another alternative. And I know I'm just one board member, but I have to say it.
Okay. And we can have any questions on this especially from our attorney who's waited so patiently. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Thank you. Is that a second, Ms.
Yeah.
Hines? Well, we did that in the beginning. I specified that when you go back, you've already done that. We will return to, if there's any action on this.